Glad you could join the Q&A today with Innovators and hashtag Black STEAM. I'm Gerard. Let's get inspired. Welcome, everybody. My name is Gerard Buckner with the Mortgage Institute for Research as part of the Discovery Building on the Outreach team. Today, we are going to be having a conversation with Lauren Edwards, a lady of amazing attributes, and I can't wait to have this conversation. Not typically UW based on like the things we've been doing within the series, but this is going to be a special one, so be ready. As we are having this conversation, if there's any questions, comments, anything people as the audience would like to share with us, please feel free to use the hashtag Black STEAM Innovators, and you can feel free to use that on all social platforms. We plan on to pulling those questions and those comments and continuing the conversation. And if there's any questions for Lauren, we will be sure to get those to her and hope to keep it going. So welcome, Lauren. Again, like I kind of told the audience, usually we are always working with folks on UW, and you're not with us from UW. Would you like to explain like who you are, where you're from, and let's get the conversation started?
Yes, so thank you all for having me. I'm not from UW, but it feels good to be welcomed with such open arms. My name is Lauren Edwards. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a neuroscientist by training. But I currently work as the executive director of the nonprofit 500 Women Scientists. And so where I'm from, I'm actually from Tucson, Arizona, but I'm currently based in Atlanta right now. That's where I had my neuroscience training, and I will actually be moving to DC this summer to start medical school. So I'm all over the place.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's kind of start off with the 500 Women. Can you explain what that is and your role in it?
Yes, so 500 Women Scientists is a nonprofit that was created in 2016 after the US election. And it was created when 4 women scientists wrote an open letter saying that they were going to fight to make science inclusive, accessible, and open to everybody. And so that commitment, they wanted the name 500 Women Scientists comes because they wanted 500 women scientists to sign on. And when I tell you, it was blown out the water. Like there were over 20,000 signatures within like 4 or 5 months. So needless to say, we stopped counting. We've stopped counting. But now we have these local chapters. There are over 500 around the world. And all of us work together to make science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine more inclusive and accessible while also fighting racism, patriarchy, and oppressive societal norms. So basically, what we're trying to do is make sure that STEM in itself can be open and inviting to everybody. And so we do that using a couple of initiatives, and we have actually several of them, really great ones. And I'll just highlight just a couple, like one being our Gauge directory, where people can actually go. It's gauge.500womenscientists.org, and people can go and find STEM professionals. And these are women and gender minorities. And so it's like this easy access, public facing resource. And you can go and find STEM professionals to learn more about. And then we also have our Fellowship for the Future, which I direct. That's how I actually started in the org. With Fellowship for the Future. And that's to support women of color in STEM who are doing community-based work to make STEM more equitable and inclusive. So kind of like what it sounds like you all are doing with this community-based outreach and trying to connect to, parents and their kids. We do things like that, and we support those women of color because, often they don't have the resources or the amplification. So we really look to kind of uplift those in STEM and make it, truly reflective of the community and bring science back into the community.
Yeah, that's exactly why we want to have this conversation, because you are special. and we have a few female Black professionals on campus doing this work, but we never really heard of 500 women before. Like I said, this was brought to our attention by one of our lovely coworkers, and it was just amazing to see that a woman of color, Black women especially during the Black History Month, is leading this. Can you explain how are you managing to run this organization and do neuroscience at the same time? That is beyond me.
Yeah, well, it worked out. So I started the organization in 2019 as a volunteer for the fellowship program. And so at that point, I was in graduate school. And so I am a neuroscientist. So my research basically, I worked with patients after stroke. And so we know that after stroke, especially a stroke in the motor cortex, which is the part of your brain that controls movement, after a stroke in that area, people have difficulties moving their arm, right? Like we take these kind of simple movements for granted,
Mhm.
and some people can no longer move. And so what I did with my research was we examined basically how the brain helped correspond that movement. And we had these really cool tools. So one of them is called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or what's called TMS. And what I always tell people that's like really amazing is that I can put a magnet on top of your head. It's all external. I can put it on top of your head and I can make a muscle in your arm move. And it's like it blows people's mind. It blew my mind. I never knew of TMS before, and I have been doing neuroscience for several years. That's what my undergraduate degree is in as well. But yeah, so we can do this, and basically, doing using this magnet allows us to assess the connections between your brain and your arm, and like how good are those connections? Because after a stroke, it's kind of like there's a roadblock in that connection,
Okay.
and that's what's stopping you from being able to move your arm.
Mhm.
So a lot of my research actually centered around evaluating those connections between the brain and the arm, and then also seeing if there's something we can do to make those connections stronger so people can have better movement. So that was my research, and I did that for a couple of years while I was working with the organization in a volunteer capacity. And then last summer, I graduated. So I'm currently not actively doing research myself, but the lab I was in, they're actually analyzing the data now, so we can kind of get some, cool findings about what do stroke patients need and what does their brain look like. So I'm currently not doing research as I'm now, effectively running 500 Women Scientists,
Yeah.
but I was for a couple of years.
That's awesome. Wow. I mean, either way, it's incredible. And thank you for sharing that work. I really, really appreciate that. So one of the main
Yeah.
questions that everybody wants to know, like, how are you being affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so our organization is one of the lucky ones because we actually work remotely. So we are like our leadership. So we have, like I said, 500 pods across the world. Our leadership spans across the US, and we have a couple people in other countries. So we're actually used to working remotely. But what has been difficult, right, is that usually we meet up twice a year to kind of have that in-person connection.
Mhm.
We don't have that anymore because of COVID. And then we also have our fellows for our fellowship for the future. They do community-based work, and we just launched last year. So with COVID, all of our fellows basically couldn't do their projects because a lot of the projects were in person with kids, and it was a safety hazard. So that has really kind of affected us, and we're currently thinking about ways to reshape those projects that are all virtual. But one of the things that's true is like people like that in-person connection. I think especially for kids, like we want them to be hands-on and really, feel and do. So we're thinking about basically expanding the timeline of those projects to hopefully when it's, safe to be together again. But that's been our hardest thing. I think us being so, spread out across the world, we're kind of thriving in this, remote world for the time being.
Awesome. Well, when you guys are able to be back together again and you do a conference, you should definitely think about coming to Madison, Wisconsin, because
Okay,
I,
yeah.
I may say it in the background. I'm not a woman, but I'll say it in the background to kind of watch because I'm really interested.
No, I appreciate that.
So we already kind of talked about like how 500 women work and all that stuff. So what do you guys like? How do you go about recruiting? Like, do you have any connection with Wisconsin by any means, whether if it's Milwaukee or Madison or Green Bay might be another area, or how would we be able to go about connecting with 500 women?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I am sure that we have, our local chapters are called pods. So it's like a well reference. We really like animals in our org. And so I'm sure we have pods that are in Wisconsin. I don't know how many, but actually we're going to be launching a new platform soon in the next few weeks. We're actually pod members will be able to kind of like have the centralized location where they can like see like where the pods are and apply to be members.
Mhm.
So for anyone in Wisconsin who is interested, they can look for a local pod. Right now, all the activities are remote due to COVID, but we also have a remote pod. So people who maybe are not in a location with a pod in reasonable distance can actually join our organization. And there are definitely tons of ways to support as well, even as not a pod member, but like we have a lot of different initiatives. Like if you are a STEM professional expert, you can sign up for our Gauge directory, right? And be found by conference organizers, media, journalists, things like that. Our Fellowship for the Future, you could apply for that. So there are definitely tons of ways to get involved. But that grassroots, right there, I'm sure would be a Wisconsin pod.
Awesome. Yeah, I can definitely see, especially with the groups that we work with, like I mentioned before, work with a lot of underrepresented areas in the Madison area specifically, and with a lot of community centers, there is a lot of girls that tend to not, that be very excited about STEM and then kind of fade away just because they don't see, when I walk in the room, they're not necessarily excited to see me per se. So it'd be really cool to be able to connect them with something like this. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
For you, like within both of the roles that you do, like what does it mean to be Black in those different roles?
Yeah, it means a lot. And I will say, in all honesty, sometimes it is really difficult to be Black in these roles. I think, like I'm a neuroscientist, but first and foremost, I'm a Black woman.
Mhm.
And that's how I identify that, like I live and breathe this existence. So I think sometimes it's difficult. And I think it's especially difficult when we're in white spaces. And I think especially when we think about training and getting that education, a lot of them are predominantly white. And
Mhm.
so it is difficult. And also in thinking like, well, how do I make moves and decisions so that the Black girls and boys coming behind me have a better time, easier path than I had. So it means a lot to me. It's something I take very seriously, something I really try. And one of our pillars in 500 Women Scientists is to change the face of science. So to change like what people think of when they think of a scientist. And so I think, being Black, I've been able to like really do that and put myself out there, but then
Yeah.
also, being true to my identity, right? So I have, natural hair and I always wear my natural hair, and I have tattoos and I have piercings, which I think things like that are really important because not only do you want to see someone who's Black, but you want to see someone who's relatable. You want to see someone who then doesn't necessarily fit the mold that you've come used to like picturing when you think of a scientist. So I think that has been probably one of my biggest like feel good moments when it's like I meet someone and they're like, oh, seeing you helped me, feel differently about STEM, but then also, having them be inspired to pursue this because there are a lot of great opportunities in STEM, but I feel like a lot of the times, especially like our Black kids, they don't have the opportunities to really start on those, you know what I mean, before they're discouraged or they're turned away.
Yeah.
So I take it very seriously and I always try and think of ways that we can definitely inspire and uplift, Black kids at like a multi-level. One of the things we're doing at 500 Women Scientists is creating a Black women's collective. And so that is geared towards the protection and upliftment and celebration of Black women in STEM.
Mhm.
And so things like that, thinking of initiative, thinking of ways we can do that. I've hosted several community outreach events with like younger kids, but thinking like, how can we make this better? And so like knowing that I'm Black and I'm here and I'm doing that work, like that feels like my responsibility. So it's really celebratory, but it's also like, knowing that like there's work to be done.
Yeah. No, also it's again, your leadership, it's amazing to be able to see you and think about like the leadership that you roll because yeah, I mean just simply I forget what is it called, the bull nose?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Like we see that like you walk into a room, I can only imagine how many folks that are matched in your position in work or maybe even I guess more seasoned in the roles that you're doing of leading a organization and things like that. That's not typically the
Yeah.
thing you see, and I could only imagine what people think and how they feel, and immediately like especially the youth now, this new generation, that like that's the new norm, like different colored hair,
Yes.
tattoos, bull nose, like that's what it is, and they shouldn't feel ashamed to be able to walk into a job interview or something like that with that and have this kind of old mindset from way back in the day. Like things are changing, and like we have leaders that can inspire us that look just like us. And so I love your style, by the way.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think like like the idea of professionalism is like heavily rooted, like anti-blackness and things. And it's like, what I look like and how I present myself, does not, indicate, the level like my level of expertise in neuroscience, right? My level of care for future patients. And I think that's a lot. We have to unlearn some of those habits. And so I think by having people in these positions who are like, I am who I am and I'm comfortable, and then to have an organization that fully supports it, right? I think that is monumental to creating that change.
Awesome, thank you. So like, so how did you know that you wanted to be in STEM? Like, what was this journey? I usually I tell people usually from high school, but like people usually give me an answer starting from when they were a youth. They knew from doing this or doing that. Like, how did you know you wanted to be in STEM, and then how did you get into neuroscience?
Yeah. So I always tell people when I was in the seventh grade, I created business cards. It was in like my computer class. I created business cards that were for me being a child psychiatrist. So it was always medicine that I started. And so I did a couple medical programs in high school, and I was actually working in a biomedical engineering lab prior to starting college. And so, like, that was my first taste of research. And one of the things about research that was great is that it paid money. And so, one of the things that's really serious you to think about is, am I going to go into a lot of debt for undergrad? And so I was a biomedical engineer my first year, and then I switched to neuroscience. And it worked out well because it aligned with all my pre-med requirements. And then I ended up, one of my mentors got me a job in a research lab, a speech pathology research lab. And then I was getting paid for research. And then I was able to get into an National Institutes of Health program called MARC, Maximizing Access to Research Careers. And so that position, it paid me, and it allowed me to do research and to prepare for an MD PhD program. And so it was these like, little steps along the way that was like, okay, research is really useful and it's really lucrative, which was important to me. But then also I really got to see like the merging between science and medicine.
Yeah.
And so I came to science kind of a roundabout way through medicine. But then I was accepted into medical school and graduate school separately. And so I chose to go to graduate school first to get that scientific training. And that was like immeasurable for me. And so that is how I like ended up with science. And then I was in neuroscience, then I was doing a doctoral program in neuroscience as well. And like just being able to be in research full time, like it taught me so much. And I feel like I'll be a better physician because of it.
Mm.
But I appreciate it. And I think you need science. You need science to, propel, like the vaccine, right? The COVID vaccine. You needed science for that. And just seeing like how much it can do to literally save lives.
Yeah.
I was like, over. I'm in science for life.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned multiple times like there's money in it, because I think that's something
Yes.
that is missed a lot, especially within cultures of people of color, like not having those trust funds or not having that wealth already built behind us. Before we start school, we have to know for sure that one, I'm not going to get a ton of debt in school, and two, when I
Yeah.
get out of it, that I'm gonna be able to make money. And we typically see like a lot of social workers or a lot of like teachers or professor, or I mean not necessarily even professors, but people in the education field,
Yeah.
because those are, not, I don't want to say easy by any means, but it's kind of more very common. Like, the route you can
Hmm.
go, and it's less risk.
Yeah.
What you did is obviously like usually thought it was a higher risk because yeah, there's a lot of school involved, a lot of time, a lot of money invested.
Yeah.
But overall, like like where the sites are, and what hopefully how much you can make in the future. And money is typically looked at as like a kind of a taboo thing to talk about, but like it's important, especially coming, yeah, from the background. I know from my background, it was definitely important because
Yeah.
from
No,
coming from background.
no, mine too, growing up, what is called technically low socioeconomic status, like I took out a loan in graduate school to, help, care for my family. Right. And so when you think about some of those situations that a lot of people of color are in, right, you have to talk about, how lucrative are these paths. And research had a lot of instances, and I had a lot of scholarships too, but like that was kind of how you had to think about it.
Mhm.
And it was just research was that avenue to, uh, to make more money. And I will say a big point you raised, right, is the idea of delayed gratification. So it's like I have been in school and 4 years undergrad, 4 years of grad school. I'll have 4 years in medical school and probably about 5 to 7 years of residency. So that is a lot of delayed gratification. And so I know sometimes it's harder to think about the end justifying the means, but it does. And I think that's one thing we can really tell our kids and really, show them.
Yeah.
And you have fun along the way. Like I know it's like sometimes like, oh, school sounds like a lot. I've had fun in school. I've had trips in school, like life has still gone on even when you're in school. So I think those are huge points that I would hope people take away from this conversation, if nothing else.
I think that would be something really interesting to talk about. Could you tell us what schools you went to?
Yeah, so I went to University of Arizona. That's where because I'm from for my undergrad, and then I went to Emory University for my graduate degree in neuroscience. And it's looking like I will be attending Howard for medical school, which is so near and dear to my heart. Yes, as an HBCU, as a school that focuses on health equity and uplifting Black patients. So that looks like my trajectory right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where is Emory?
Emory's in Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Man, you have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
What has been your favorite? I mean, you've only been to two schools so far, but what was your favorite so far?
I had some really good times at both. I think the reason why I chose Emory for my graduate school was I came to interview, and there was like we were at like they do like a party for applicants,
Mhm.
and I was sitting on a couch and there was like six other Black people in the neuroscience program, and they were like, yeah, I like it here. And to me, like that was such the validation I needed. Like, you are Black here and you like being in Atlanta, you like being at Emory. So I think that was like one of my like favorite parts, and I've just made lifelong friends.
Mhm.
So it's been great.
Would you say representation was very important for you, like going throughout your college career?
Oh, definitely. I attended a predominantly white, institution for undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to be in a city where I, didn't walk into a restaurant, I was the only Black person there.
Hmm.
So that's why I chose Atlanta. And then same thing, thinking about medical school, I knew I wanted to be in another diverse city, and DC gave me that. And then to be at Howard at a HBCU that really focuses on, we see a lot of these disparities for Black people right now in COVID. So to now be able to go to an HBCU that really, lives and breathes the work of health equity, I think that's huge. I think what we saw a lot of this summer with like Black Lives Matter and the protests, where a lot of people made, statements. A lot of people made statements in support of that, but very few had actions. And so, wanting to then now my next step be at an HBCU was important.
I, this is completely off from what we were going to talk about. So if you're not going to answer this question, I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in thinking, like, for those schools that necessarily don't have the most representation, but maybe working on that, or maybe saying like Black Lives Matter and they feel that they want to work on it. What do you think is the most important first step from, obviously from the higher ups to be able to create the culture and to change the diversity within that campus?
I think accountability, that is one thing we are, and something we grapple with at 500 Women Scientists is how do we ensure institutional accountability, right? Because it's not enough if you have Black students there, if they're tokenized, right? If they're abused, if the culture is, exploitative. So you have to have accountability within your systems, and you need people in power who are, not only diverse, but who are reflective of those values. Because
Mhm.
we see a lot of times you have like one, token minority, and then they go along with the same culture that, has them marginalized. So,
Mhm.
wanting to make sure there are accountability and making sure that people also realize like you should be stepping down. Like it makes no sense why all these university presidents and things, the culture they've allowed to exist for so long, you should step aside and let new people, right, come in and create a better culture.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then the question I had, you kind of spoke about this, but more of a like a directional timeline. How does one begin to get to the process of where you are at now?
Whew,
Loaded, I
yeah.
know.
They're like, woo, it's been a journey. I would say I always tell people, especially when I work with children, high school is important. I try and get to kids like elementary, but really middle school to be like, you need to have your studying habits down. You need to have, you need to figure out how you learn. You need to figure out what you like. By the time you get to high school, because those high school grades really impact, college choices. I don't think college is for everyone. I think we push it a lot, and I think it is a, a moving tool, especially for minorities. I don't think it's for everyone. But if college is the route you want to go, then in high school, I think you start looking into opportunities. Um, one thing's hard, right? It's hard to like you can't create the opportunities yourself, but find them. Find mentors. I think having community is so huge. So find community who can expose you to those opportunities in high school and then in college, and then do well. Like take the time to learn, take the time to put an effort to your grades, take the time to know your professors, right? Because they write your letters of rec that then get you to places like graduate school. And I think explore a lot of opportunities. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is find something you love, and then like dive in. Yeah, and as far as how I got into 500 Women Scientists, that was just something that I was like, I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to make a larger change than what I was making. So I was working like at the community level, and I decided to work at something that was going to be at a national level. And then I got in as a volunteer. I put my head down, I got to work, I had ideas, and then they saw, really quickly the value that I added. And then I became director of fellowship. And then I was, asked to be the executive director to kind of really set the strategy and vision for the organization. And that was because I had proven myself all along the way.
Oh, you said something that really spoke to me. Of saying in middle school, learn how you learn. I feel like, and like it's interesting to think about it because I think about when I was in middle school. I wish I knew that, and like
Yeah.
I had really no way of doing that. But it makes me really think about like, yeah, how can schools be able to take the time and helping students learn how they learn? Because I think, yeah, absolutely. When you get to high school, it's almost too late to kind of learn how you learn because
Yeah,
obviously
it's really
each
difficult.
semester is very important for your GPA to get accepted into a college. So that would be a really interesting strategy to kind of go about in trying to push schools to really be able to create a curriculum on learning students specifically and like the best ways they learn and be able to adjust to that, right? But I thought that was special. Thank you for that comment. Okay. Um, for my last question today, what advice do you have for somebody that you may have inspired today? I know you kind of already spoke about the things that they need to do, but was there anything that you did or that somehow affected you that you would tell another student that may be watching today?
Yeah, I hit on it before, but I want to emphasize it is to find community. I Community has seen me through my best of days and my worst of days. Um, and so I think that that is and especially community, right? That you vibe with, community that looks like you, community that supports you. I think you can get through so much once you have that community. And I think don't be afraid to ask for people to be in that community. Don't be afraid to ask that community for things you need, and let that community love on you, because what we've seen and learned, right? Life is hard. Like going through, will never forget organic chemistry. Like there are just things that are hard. And to have those people to love on you and build you up is everything, and it will get you through. So that is my biggest advice. And I hope something we said resonated with somebody. And I would love to take any questions. One of the things I'm really passionate about is also, helping students, plan, like, getting ready for college. I was fortunate that I had, I don't even remember now. I had a lot of scholarships in college. I was actually able to make over 60 grand in college from, yeah. So that was like one thing. And my little sister went out of state. I was in state. My little sister went out of state and she didn't have debt from her undergrad either. So that's something that I'm also like really passionate about, making sure our kids don't have debt. So I am definitely open to questions and helping out the best I can.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Like I said,
Yeah.
and to the audience again, remember, if you do have questions, comments, or anything, that use the hashtag BlackSteam. And as you already heard, Lauren, she will get back to you for sure. So
Yes.
I love how you're so into community because that's all we're about. We're all about community. So
Yeah.
this is like just a perfect marriage almost.
Yes.
For people that want to learn more about you, how can people find you? Website, social media. If you guys use social media, what are the best ways?
Yeah, so 500 Women Scientists you can find at the number 500 women, and then SCI. 500 Women Sci is all of our social media. I have a LinkedIn, which is Lauren L. Edwards. You can search that. I don't have any other social media. I that's not something I just, I protect my spirit. So I don't do social media like that. But you can find us at 500womenscientists.org for all of our latest opportunities, ways for you to get involved. And yeah, let us know what we can do. We're here to serve the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. It's been absolutely a pleasure to get to know you and be able to have this conversation. I really hope that we're able to connect again in the future, in the near future. Again, I know we don't necessarily have a connection with, university and you in Atlanta and things like that, but I think that's the whole part of community is being able to create these connections all around the world, and especially here in the United States for the students that we serve on an everyday basis. So yeah, that's all I have. Did you have anything else for us today?
No, but thank y'all so much for having me. Thanks for the excellent conversation. This just made my day, and now I feel energized to go do work. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, to everybody else, y'all have a good rest of y'all day. Thank you for joining us.